I definitely didn't know what I wanted to do when I was, 10 years old. And I kind of ended up in the built environment. But I'm really happy that I did because I absolutely love it as an industry. Sustainability is such a massive part of that industry as well. So it just felt like two fantastic kind of overlaps. It was kind of like I'd always cared about the environment and sustainability.
Yeah.
And then having that industry that I also really found interesting, it was just really perfect. So it's kind of like I knew I was going to stay in that no matter what I did.
Okay.
Most of the buildings will not be kind of temples to consumerism where it's just all about shopping and buying things, but be the spaces where, people can really live rather than just exist.
Welcome to Accelerating to a Better Future, a podcast where we explore the journeys of founders from the undaunted Better Futures Retrofit Accelerator by Imperial College, London. I'm Lydia, a banker turned entrepreneur, blending finance and passion. I'm on my own startup journey in carbon finance to scale carbon removal, and I share impactful stories of founders and entrepreneurs through my own content creation. It's an honor to be your host for this podcast. Today, we have Josephine Bromley, the founder of MapMortar today. Welcome, Josephine, to the show.
Thank you very much, Lydia.
It's good to have you. Can you introduce MapMortar to us?
Yeah, of course. So MapMortar is a virtual modelling and simulation platform for real estate owners to plan, manage and execute portfolio decarbonisation.
Well, sounds really cool. We'll go to True Tools and Lie, a climate journey version.
Yeah.
So if you can tell me 3 statements, one of them is a lie about your climate journey.
Sure. So 3 statements. One, I met my co-founders for the first time, and in less than 2 months we formed the company. 2, I've been to 3 COPs. And 3, I have never formally studied anything related to the built environment or climate.
I think the second one is a lie.
Yeah.
Because I've done a little bit of research and went onto your LinkedIn. How many COPs have you been to?
None.
Usually that's the case when people play around with the number.
Yeah. No, that's what I thought. You'd be fooled by me saying I've been to 3. I've not been to any.
Yeah. I haven't ever been to any of the COPs either. So you've met your co-founder within 2 months, and then you started a company.
Yes. We met and we all had experience working in the built environment in different areas. And we were all obviously compelled around the sustainability challenges of decarbonising buildings, or I originally was quite interested in new building materials, kind of carbon neutral or more carbon friendly building materials. But then we all got on, which I think is really important as founders, first of all. And then we were all really inspired by the ideas that we were having together, and it seemed like a really good fit. So we decided to form the company. We felt from very early on that we had quite complementary skill sets. So one more commercial person, one more technical person, one more operational person, which is my role. And we spent quite an intense 2 months getting to know each other, obviously, but really just feeling very creative, talking about all the problems in our industry related to sustainability and how our backgrounds, our skill sets, our learnings could be kind of, you could find that overlap,
Yeah, it's very important.
Totally, yeah. I think that's it. You find something that's important, like a big problem to solve, something that you're good at, and something that's meaningful. And if you can get that trifecta, then you should pursue that. And that's where we ended up at the end of the 2 months. So it made sense to start a company together.
Oh, that's great.
The idea back then, it was still related to virtual modelling of buildings, and it was still related to obviously decarbonising existing buildings. But if I look at how we imagined people would use the software, it was just completely different to what it is now. We kind of, in a way, I still kind of imagine this. We imagined sort of like this Sim City kind of world where people would be able to really touch and feel their buildings in this virtual world and simulate how to decarbonize and all these kind of fancy. We got very excited about technology, I would say.
Yeah.
And now it feels like we're actually, the software is much more practical and valuable in a way. And we've obviously still got virtual modeling, we've still got the clever technology, but we've simplified how the user experience is in a big way, which has made the software much better, to be honest.
The user interface
Yeah.
has been evolved, but
We take a lot of the principles that we have from our software from digital twins. And digital twins have been around as a concept and a body of technology for quite a while. But they've always been used in more, I'd say, complex structures, or where you're just looking at an individual building, you want to get into it like really real detail with it. And we basically say, hey, that's great for that particular use case, but there's a use case which is maybe underserved at the moment, which is where we're looking at portfolio decarbonisation. And we can take a lot of that modelling intelligence, if you will, that smart technology, and apply it in a way which is quite unique. So it's the application of the technology, if that makes sense.
You mentioned in the True Tools and the Lie that before you worked on this, you were not into climate tech. You don't have experience, didn't have experience.
Yeah, so I studied languages at university, so
Yeah.
completely different to what I'm doing now. And my career was also very all over the place.
Yeah.
And I definitely didn't know what I wanted to do when I was, 10 years old. And I kind of ended up in the built environment. But I'm really happy that I did, because I absolutely love it as an industry. And also sustainability is such a massive part of that industry as well. So it just felt like two fantastic kind of overlaps. It was kind of like I'd always cared about the environment and sustainability.
Yeah.
And then having that industry that I also really found interesting, it was just really perfect. So it's kind of like I knew I was going to stay in that no matter what I did.
Okay. So we've talked about this Carbon 13, but let's focus on the accelerator you are in now, which is the reason why we're here. I think they've done a really good job of bringing together all the startups in the built environment, the retrofit market, 24 of them. What is the best thing that you think that they have done in the whole process? And if you can share with us.
Yeah, totally. So I think, as you say, the focus that they have on retrofit specifically is unique, and I think that's one of the best approaches that they've taken to the accelerator. It always surprises me because there are just literally billions of buildings around the world that need to be retrofitted. But I don't think it gets the attention that it deserves. And it also takes more than like a single specialty or a single company to decarbonize a building or retrofit a building as well. So the number of people is really important. We need a lot more people focused on retrofitting. And also the collaborative aspects is really important to retrofitting as well. And I feel like Imperial's really taken that into account when they've structured the accelerator. So there's a real mixture of organizations within the accelerator. It wasn't just one type of profile. They didn't focus just on AI, which is a bit of a buzzword. It was very kind of like, let's focus on how we can solve almost like, I like to think of it as sort of the meta problems to retrofitting. So obviously there's the problem of how do I raise the money to retrofit? How do I get the right people involved? How do I get the right data? But then also, okay, we know that it's about collaboration. So how do we actually collaborate better when it comes to retrofitting, which is quite a unique thing to think about because it's actually a real problem that doesn't get enough focus, I think. So yeah, I think that only comes from maybe a deep understanding of the problem of retrofitting and of the industry as well. And yeah, it just shows in the way that they've structured the accelerator that somebody knows what they're talking about when they set it up.
How do they help this collaboration within the accelerator?
Yeah, it's just, I think it's that great facilitation. So for example, we've been in a few workshops now where we'll focus on a particular industry issue, which is often to do with collaboration and maybe the lack of standards as well. So a really good example of a workshop that I was in was looking at, for example, when startups are trying to get a pilot in, with maybe a local authority looking to retrofit their buildings, social housing, basically like a portfolio, is there maybe a standardization that we can put around just setting up a pilot? Because that's obviously one of the first stages when it comes to innovation. You want to kind of test it out, get an MVP, get some early data which shows actually this is promising. But even getting to that point can be so painful. And does it really need to be that painful? Can we standardize it in a way, in the same way that procurement is pretty standardized, but it's not standardized for innovation? So I think that for me has been that was, again, so valuable to be thinking in that way.
Yeah.
And that you actually sat in the same room with people who do work at local authorities in the procurement team, or BSI was there, they do standards. It's like, those are the people you need in the room having that conversation.
Oh, that sounds great. Josephine, you've been in the clean tech space for 2 years. I'm wondering, from your own experience or your observation, to see how do you see this ecosystem evolve to address diverse needs?
In the 2 years that I've been in the space, I've seen definitely an increase in community. So, for example, there's a really great community group called Climate Connection. Those kind of community groups are really important for making sure that people can enter into the clean tech space or climate tech space without needing to quit their day job or sacrifice everything. Because if you are starting a company, then I think it's not something you take on lightly, and it can be very exclusive in a bad way for people who have kids, for example, or don't have a huge amount of money already, or are not in a certain city, or all these kind of things.
They need to be shown how to do work like that. I've been
Yes.
to Climate Connection as well.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah. Speaking of but then in your experience in the Retrofit Accelerator, do you feel like there's is it a positive experience for you as well?
Yeah, I think that's an example of an accelerator where you could say that diverse needs or barrier to entry is lowered. So, for example, in the past, if you wanted to get funding or if you wanted to speak to the right people, you just had to know them already.
Yeah.
And then obviously you're creating a little bit of a club where that's impossible to enter if you already don't have a membership. But if you make an accelerator where anyone can enter, it's free of charge, it's virtual, so you don't have to be in a specific location. Maybe it also takes place in hours where you can make it work with your job and your family and all these kind of things. Then you make something accessible which maybe wasn't before.
Yeah, that actually increased innovation in the
exactly
in the space.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what next for MapMortar. What is your scale-up plan and the next milestone business roadmap?
Yeah, so I feel like we're getting to a really, really exciting point, actually. So we've gone through the tricky first kind of pre-seed round, which was, took years off us, but we got there. We've got a really great team. I really, really love our team now. Really excited about the product. We've got some really amazing kind of first customers, and it's fun just to have product sessions with them and deep dives into what your challenges are and all this kind of stuff. So now the next stage, I like to think of it almost like we've gone past the early ideation, almost like the problem solution validation. I think we're past that now. I feel quite confident in, yes, we've got a real problem and a real solution. And now we're going more into the operationalization of that. So ultimately trying to find like really strong product market fit, which I think makes sense for the age of the company being around 2 years old, the size, the kind of customers we have, all that kind of stuff. Which, people use metaphors all the time about a startup. You feel like you're pushing a boulder up a hill until you reach the top, and then you're kind of chasing the boulder. We're definitely still pushing a boulder up a hill, but we've got a few more people helping us push it up at the moment, which makes things a bit easier.
You must be really busy.
Yeah, really busy, but it's really exciting. It is really exciting.
It is really exciting. Speaking about the future, because we're living in a hotter and hotter world, so the extreme weather conditions will be less of a outlier in the future. Is that in the built environment, especially where in London, a lot of the buildings do not have that, say for example, AC to deal with this kind of weather.
Yeah.
Do you see that there's a role in MapMortar or in your business that, like, what's the relevance there?
Yeah, totally. I always think of buildings, like, the thing about buildings, we all spend around 90% of our lives inside, right?
Yeah.
So how our buildings are so important to the quality of our lives. And that is always in our minds when we think about the software and we think about the kind of data we're trying to put in there and ultimately the kind of retrofit we're trying to achieve. So to put that into perspective, we 100% understand that no matter, you could have, a calculation which says this is a really comfortable room, but if the tenant is not comfortable, then that building has not been retrofitted according to what that tenant needs. And being able to understand that data, feed it into the platform, and consider that when you're doing retrofit plans is so important, and something that we're definitely we are building in essentially. Another really important thing is having this long-term view when it comes to retrofit as well. So you're absolutely right about increased heat, more extreme weather. But bear in mind, we've got an aging population as well. So older people are more susceptible to heat because their body temperature doesn't regulate in the same way. And we're kind of looking at an inverted triangle at the moment, where in Europe there's going to be an older population, more older people than younger people, essentially, in not that too long of a time, maybe 20 odd years. So we need to think of that when we're retrofitting, not, okay, let's think of just we want to hit a regulatory standard by 2030.
Yeah.
Because the regulations catch up with the climate, not the other way around.
Yeah.
And that's 100% how we think about the software as well. Of course, we'll get you to where you need to be. We'll get you ticking those boxes and take the pressure off regulation. But it's kind of
should be an evolving model.
Yeah, you don't want to get stuck in that kind of myopic view of, I just need to do this and move on. It's more like, no, you need to treat buildings as products. Rather than just kind of these static assets that you just I change the windows once and I don't need to worry about it. It's unfortunately not how buildings are.
No, exactly. And that's not how the climate is either.
No.
We should go to a lightning round. Who would you want to collaborate with in the climate tech space?
So I'm going to give a boring answer. Yeah. I'm just going to say more of our customers. So more property owners of large portfolios, more property managers of large portfolios. It's a shameless plug for MapMortar, but we absolutely love working with our customers, and we love collaborating with them as well. So much more of them, please.
Yeah, eventually it's the people who are going to use your technology should be the one. The second question is, do you have a favorite book in the climate tech space?
Yeah, so the first book that really inspired me to shift my career into climate was Green Swans. So I found it really inspirational. It's a non-fiction book, obviously. But yeah, I highly recommend it to anyone who is just trying to get to understand climate as a holistic space. And it's really, as I say, it gets you really excited about the future as well.
Green Swans. Nice. I'll put it on my list.
Yeah.
Who inspired you to work in sustainability?
I think nature, the environment is very inspiring. It's very meaningful, I think, to a lot of people. That goes without saying. And I think maybe it somehow feels like we're the first generation which will start to feel the worst effects of climate change and be most aware of those things. So I, inspired by humanity, but also the planet, obviously, as well.
If MapMortar has a theme song, what would that be?
The theme tune to the Rocky film,
yeah.
when he's running up the stairs, which we found out is actually called Go a Little Higher, I think. Which is the first time I realised that song had a name, but that would be the theme tune.
Because you feel like you're constantly going a little
higher. You constantly, as a startup founder, you're constantly pushing, you constantly feel kind of out of breath in a way, but you have to keep going to get to the top of the stairs.
Yeah, that's inspiring. Final one. Do you have a productivity hack?
Yes, I have quite a few. I love productivity hacks. It's basically my hobby, which is quite sad. But my biggest one that I really enjoy at the moment is after every meeting, schedule in at least 10 minutes to write up that meeting and digest it. Especially with customers, there's so many kind of nuggets of information or little things of inspiration which you'll miss if you just don't spend a little bit of time to gather all those thoughts afterwards. And I've found that not doing that, you can look back over the past 2 weeks, for example, and just think, I've spoken to so many people, but I can't remember what we spoke about.
So we have a closing tradition that you answer a question from a previous guest. Our previous guest, Bas, is the founder of Home Energy Foundry, and he has left a question for you. What would London's built environment look like in 500 years?
Again, if we think about buildings as products. There's this whole thing in our industry as well of space as a service, essentially rethinking the way that we rethink buildings. And there's this really exciting thing about microgrids, virtual power plants. So in 500 years, we use buildings in extremely flexible ways. So for example, we have use buildings essentially in the same way we use petrol stations now. So we put all sorts of solar panels on buildings. We have battery storage there, and it means for our electric vehicles that we have, we can charge them anywhere. We can create our own energy anywhere. Getting any of energy is as ubiquitous as getting Wi-Fi, for example. So that's how I imagine in 500 years. We have buildings which are work in tandem with nature. So we use a lot of like green roofs or green walls. So we try to encourage a lot of nature and biodiversity within cities. There's going to be massive urban populations in 500 years. I think like 70% of the world's population is going to be in cities by 2050, which is definitely not 500 years. So cities and buildings are built entirely for people, and almost we can move buildings around like Lego blocks as well. Modular, exactly. So if people want to move to a certain space, or it makes sense to move to a certain space, we just move the city with them as well. So there's more mobility in that way. There's also the kind of huge piece about transport as well. I think we'll completely see transport revolutionised, obviously everything electric, but much greater public transport, autonomous vehicles. I imagine, all those kind of futuristic pictures of cities where there's lots of trees everywhere and robots. That's kind of what I imagine, but in a good way. Yeah. Oh, and one fact, this is me getting on my soapbox now, but most of the buildings will not be kind of temples to consumerism where it's just all about shopping and buying things, but be spaces where people can really live rather than just exist.
That's a good future to look forward to. If you can leave a question for our next guest.
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think in the same vein. I've seen this question before, so I'm going to completely plagiarize it. But if you could write a letter to yourself in 2050, what would be in the letter?
Wow, that's a powerful question. Well, thanks so much for coming to the podcast, Josephine.
Thanks so much for having me, Lydia. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us today, our wonderful listeners. We're signing off from Imperial College London's Hub of Innovation and Scale Space, and we appreciate you tuning in. The Better Futures Retrofit Accelerator is supported by the Greater London Authority's Better Futures programme, co-funded by the UK government through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. In the face of climate change, we are undaunted. For more amazing updates of our events and activities, subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on LinkedIn and X, and of course, go tell a friend. This is me, Lydia Chen, and thank you for listening to Accelerating to a Better Future.